thank you all for coming here tonight. Joining me here, for those from the media, Spence Jackson, media director from my office in the front row here, and Tom Schweich, who is the audit manager, who does a great job. Does a lot of the auditing in the Kansas City area, particularly the school districts, and he's one of our finest auditors, and he's here also to answer any questions you might have. Richard Stuckler, he also does a lot of work. He's in the back, handing out all the reports. If you need any audit reports, we have them back there. What I'm going to do today is go over the findings of the audit that we did, and then take a few questions. But I want to make a few introductory remarks. This is a petition audit. In my audit office, we do about 150 audits a year, and 15 to 20 of them are petition audits, and that's when citizens take the time to gather signatures and present a certain number of signatures to us, and that triggers the need to do an audit. We consider petition audits to be the most important audits that we do in the state auditor's office because it's citizens taking the time to ask democracy to work. They get the signatures, they come to the government, they say, will you please help us, and then we do that. So I think petition audits are extremely important. I put a very high priority on them, and we always do them first. And so we're happy to be back here. In this particular case, in order to qualify for the auditor to do a petition audit, you had to submit 10% signatures amounting to 10% of the people that voted in the last governor's election. In this case, that would have been 1,478 signatures, and you turned in 1,684 signatures, which then activated the state auditor's office to do the audit. We spent 1,289 hours on the audit, a lot of time. That's why it took so long. There's a lot of things to look at. We estimated the cost would be $35,000 to $50,000. The actual cost was $55,000, but we'll probably just cap it at $50,000 because when there's a petition audit, the entity being audited is required by state law to pay the costs. We audited the year ending June 30, 2013, but we also, whenever we do, we focus on one fiscal year, but we also look forward and we look back when we see some sort of significant problem. My audit findings are intended to be completely constructive in nature. My office never takes any pleasure in pointing out problems. We're not here to settle political scores or issues that people have with one another. Our objective is very simple. When taxpayer money is being spent and when citizens ask us to come and look, we try to evaluate whether that money is being spent in accordance with state law, federal law, the internal policies and procedures of the school district, sound accounting practices, and sound business practices. That's all we look at. And we report on the results, not to make anybody feel bad or embarrass anybody, to simply get improvement. And what I will say right now is that we did find some significant problems here, but we also saw a school district, a superintendent, and a board that was committed to resolving all those problems, and so we're pleased about that. When I became state auditor almost 4 years ago, I put in place something that had not been done before, which is a grading system. Just like we get grades when we're in school. I mean, it's an excellent, good, or fair report. I guess you could say it's really an A, a B, a C, or a D. And we did that on very specifically defined criteria, which are on our website. We don't just pick a number out of there. We had very specific criteria for what it takes to get those ratings. In this particular school district, we gave the school district rating a fair, which would be kind of like a C. And that's largely due to one finding, which I'll get to in a minute about the bonds and the way our certain bond issue was handled. Had it not been for that one significant problem, we would have given the school a pretty high rating. I want to say at the outset, and this, and again, I know some petitioners might not be happy about this, but we audit a lot of school districts and we have a lot of experience. That by and large, this is a pretty well-run school district. We did not find a lot of problems. We found one really big problem and several minor problems, which is why we gave it a fair rating. But if you can fix the problem with the bonds, I think that people in this community can be confident that they have a well-run school district, and that's the first thing I want to say. With that introduction, I want to go through the findings one by one, and then I'm happy to answer a few questions afterwards, and then we will be back to do a follow-up audit in a few months. Another thing I put in place when I became auditor is if you get a fair or poor on my scale, we come back 90 days later. Sometimes we give people a little more time than that, just to make sure that the recommendations we said that the district committed to implement actually have been implemented. I think follow-up is very important. Accountability is very important, so we will be back to make sure that the commitments that the district have been made have been fully implemented. We'll be back in 3 or 4 months to do that. The first finding, and the first thing in the audit report was by and large and above and away the most significant finding that we had, which relates to the QZA bonds. The district issued qualified zone academy bonds, QZA, 3 times since 2008, totaling $8.2 million. But we did find there were serious issues of non-compliance with the QZA bond program. The QZA program is a federal government program. We actually don't see it a whole lot in Missouri, but we think it's creative that the district availed itself of this. Basically, to make a long story short, the bondholder, people that buy the bonds get a federal tax credit instead of interest. That can be very helpful to some people who are in high tax brackets. But in order to be eligible for the QZA program, the district must find a partner that's willing to invest 10% of the value of the bonds, which would be $820,000 in this case, because it's an $8.2 million total bond issue, to make contributions, and it has to be 10% of the proceeds. In this case, there's also some problems with the way the bonds were used, because when you issue a QZA bond, you really have to spend the money mostly on infrastructure type improvements. There's a long list of things, but it's mostly basic infrastructure improvements in the district. In this case, the district's business partner was a local bank, entered into a written agreement to provide contributions totaling $820,000 over the course of 12 to 15 years. The way they planned to provide that 10% investment of the bonds was through internships. There's a lot, you don't have to just give cash, you can do an in-kind type of situation. They promised to give students in the school district internships valued at $820,000 over the life of the bonds. And that was our commitment, and that's the condition. Getting that commitment and getting that commitment executed is a condition of getting these tax credits to the bond holders. And what we found when we did the audit is that there is no internship program. The business partner made no contributions of any kind from 2008 to 2013, and may, based on what we've heard, even if repudiated its obligation to do so. When the district contacted the bank in late 2013, for example, representatives informed them the bank was now under ownership and did not plan to honor the prior agreements. That's a serious problem, because now, technically, they're not qualified to issue those bonds because you're not getting that $820,000 investment. Now, I know that you're still working with that partner. There's still hope that that partner will come through, and we'll be back in 90 days to see what progress has been made on that. But there's a real issue about whether these bondholders are really entitled to get that tax deduction, because there was not that $820,000 investment that was promised. The other problem we found with it was, and this is a relatively small problem, it's about $117,000 of the bond proceeds went to buying uniforms, which is clearly not allowable under the QZA program. The rest of the expenditures, over $8 million, appear to be proper, but there was a $117,000 expenditure that was improper. So that really is, for those of you who've seen the petition, the biggest finding of the audit. It is a serious problem. Needs to be fixed, and we hope we can work with the district over the next 90 days, and then the district can work with its investor over the next 90 days to find some way to make sure the district qualifies for that program, because you have these bondholders out there now that need their deductions. That's why they bought the bonds. We also had some issues which are much more common in school districts with the way the bond financing occurred. As auditors, we do competition. It's part of our free market system. We believe there should be no conflicts of interest. In this case, the person that underwrote the bonds was also the person that advised the district on how to handle a bond issue. We think that's an inherent conflict of interest. If you're advising the district, there should be competition, and a different entity should be the one underwriting the bonds. That occurs in many school districts, but it doesn't occur in many school districts. And it's been one of my missions to get that conflict of interest out, because you really can't get good, accurate advice when the same person advising is also saying, okay, also I should be the one doing the underwriting. You're not going to get objective advice in that situation. The other thing we'd like to see is competition for bonds. We did a study last year, and we concluded that across the state, this is statewide, not just in Grandview, but statewide, a school district could save about $10 million a year if they competed out their bonds. We issued a study. We hope that the administration will look at that and engage in first of all, remove the conflict of interest, and second of all, engage in competition. That is a much more common finding across the state, but it would save the district money if it were handled properly. We also believe that when they came to the use of the bond proceeds, the plans that were prepared and how to use them and how to finance the effort were not very specific. The ballot language for the bond issue is very broad. What we like to see once they're actually spending the money is a plan for how we're going to spend the money to make sure that the citizens of this district can see the money was well spent, there's transparency and openness so that they can track the bonds correctly. There were definitely some problems. There was not a good mechanism to track project costs, to see if they're staying on budget and other things like that. So we would like to see better tracking of the bond proceeds so that you, as citizens of the community, can say, okay, is that money being well spent or not? Should we come to board meetings and talking about maybe spending it differently? The data that you all need to evaluate whether the bond proceeds were being properly spent was not there, and the district has committed to fixing that problem and being much more open in the way that the budgeting occurs and the operations occur. So our recommendations
from our audits, and that's really what this is all about, is making recommendations and seeing positive change. Was first of all, you got to comply with the requirements of the QCA program, pursue open competition in future bond sales, eliminate conflicts of interest in future bond sales, develop written plans each bond issue for how that money is going to be spent, and then track that money properly. That's pretty standard business. Those controls were lacking in these bond issues, and we're asking the district fix those problems. We received a total 100% commitment from the district to fix these problems, and so we're confident they will be resolved, but we will be back. We make sure, we will be back to make sure they happen. But that's the big finding. That's the main reason why we get a fair rating to this district. If it had not been for that problem, we would have given the district a pretty good rating. But I will go through some of the other issues that we think need to be taken care of. There were some problems with the bank reconciliations. There's a general ledger fund, and of course there's a bank account. And those two numbers need to match in accounting. And we found a $241,000 discrepancy in that for the year 2011. After some work was done with the school district's outside auditors, and we came in and looked at it, that amount that was discrepancy was reduced to, I think, $35,000. So in a district that spends the kind of money to spend, a $35,000 difference is not a disaster, but we like to see folks balancing exactly, and we found a $35,000 discrepancy where we still can't go figure out what happened to that $35,000. With respect to the rest of the $240,000, we were able to figure out what happened to it. There's a $35,000 discrepancy, and we hope that the district will continue to look at that and try to get the books to balance completely. But we're close to being there in that case. We thought there were some improvements that needed to be made to procurement practices in the district. For example, purchase orders. When you buy something, there should be a contract for that. We found that in many cases, the purchase is made and then the contract is issued after the purchase order district puts something in the record. That's not the way it works. You have a contract before you buy something, not after you buy something. So we asked that those issues be resolved, and there's a full commitment on the part of the school district to do that. We like to see competition for services, such as legal services, auditing services. There were some issues lacking there you can read about in the audit report. So we want those contracting practices improved, and there's been a full commitment on the part of the district to improve those contracting practices. We found some issues about controls over computers. We find this very commonly around state and big state agencies. Password controls were inadequate, computer security was inadequate. The opportunity for hacking for people who are not authorized to work on one computer to work on that computer were there, and we asked that those processes and procedures be improved, and the district has committed to doing that. Backup data. You do backups in this district, which is good. Some districts don't do it, but the backup data is kept on the same place as the original data. You're supposed to keep backup data somewhere else in case there's a flood or a bad rainstorm or whatever. If they destroy your computers, you want to be able to use that backup data. You're in a situation until now where if there was some unfortunate event, it would likely destroy both the original data and the backup data. So we asked that be separated, and the district is committed to do that activity as well. Which we were pleased about. We found some problems with sunshine law, and I know petitioners rightfully get very unhappy because the whole purpose of the sunshine law is to make sure you all have access to what's going on in the school. There was some non-compliance. There were some meetings where there was no agenda or minutes for audit committee meetings. Some facilities improvement team committee meetings did not have agendas or minutes, and in some cases there was not proper legal approval of those minutes by the board. So we asked that sunshine law compliance be improved. I don't know if you know this is a big issue for me. I won the Sunshine Hero Award last year because I am very, very intent on making sure the Missouri government is transparent and open, and that you all have access to meetings when you're entitled to, and there were definitely some deficiencies. Now, I will tell you the deficiencies here were not nearly as bad as I found in some districts very close to here, which you might have read about. Some of the other audits I found, but there were problems, and those issues need to be corrected, and you all need to have access to the meetings, and you need to know what was discussed in the meetings, and if meetings go into closed session, you need to know why they go into closed session. If they're not going to let you look at what's going on, you need an explanation. So those things have to be corrected, and we have a commitment by the district to do so, and we'll be back in a few months to make sure that those situations have been corrected. Capital assets, we thought that the district lacked adequate procedures and records for capital assets, other than tablet computers where there were accurate things. Capital assets is basically inventory. It's making sure that materials and things that the school buys are accounted for. And inventory, if you looked at an audit in our office at 20 or 30 years of inventory was like this, or that, a table or a podium. Inventory now is cameras, phones, computers, things that can be stolen, things that have a lot of value when they are stolen. So we've really been cracking down around the state and making sure that people aren't using inventory procedures from 30 years ago because nobody steals lists. So people were kind of lax about it 30 years ago, like inventory. But a lot of school districts and other state entities have now improved their inventory control processes to reflect the fact that inventory is more movable and more valuable than it used to be. So we hope that that will be done more effectively. Now, it was being done with the tablet computers, but it wasn't being done with other important inventory type devices. So our recommendation there is to maintain complete, accurate, and detailed capital asset records. So the bottom line here is, you've got a big problem with the bonds that needs to be fixed. You've got smaller problems with sunshine law compliance, capital asset management, and the other problems I identified here, which we're confident can be corrected very, very quickly. That's all we found. I will tell you that it's a good idea to have this audit done. It's painful to the district. It can be painful to people involved. But I think they see we've taken a very constructive approach to it. We appreciate that the petitioners brought us in here. I think we've identified some areas that need to be improved. But by and large, once these issues are resolved, I think the people of this community can be confident that they have a well-run school district. So it's an honor to serve as your state auditor. It's an honor to come here and talk to you personally. I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes and answer some questions. I do have a 3-hour drive back home tonight, so I'm not going to stay too long, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.